am Starry Ari, your lovely dovely PNG tuber, here today to give you my first ever YouTube video and my first ever character evaluation of Tighnari. Now you might be wondering why I chose Tighnari for my first character evaluation, and that's because Tighnari is my favorite character from Genshin Impact. And if you're wondering why it's Tighnari, I think it's because I tend to gravitate towards green, smart characters, and my favorite animal is a fox. So Tighnari is kind of just a melting pot of all my favorite things, and so I decided to talk about him first. Now, this is my first YouTube video, so if you have any recommendations to make my content better, or recommendations for more characters to evaluate, please comment them down. And I am not just going to do Genshin Impact characters, I can also do characters from other video games or TV shows. Anyway, so let's get into it. Just to start with, I thought that we could just go over some stuff that people might already know about Tighnari, in that he is a playable character from Genshin Impact, he is from the region of Sumeru, he has a dendrovision, and he is a renowned scholar in botany. But let's get started on the actual evaluation. First, let's start with occupation. Tighnari, as you might already know, is the chief of the Forest Watchers in the Invidia Forest. But if you don't know what a Forest Watcher exactly is, it's a higher-ranking version of a Forest Ranger, both of which are civil servants in Sumeru. That was kind of hard to say. Forest Watchers are most active in the Invidia Forest, and they are responsible for helping travelers and preserving and maintaining Sumeru's delicate ecosystem. One of their main jobs is to suppress withering zones. And if you haven't played through Sumeru, withering zones are dangerous and dying portions of the forest caused by King Deshret introducing forbidden knowledge, a type of truth rejected by the world of Teyvat because of its alien nature. And people who are exposed to this knowledge can cause the land around them to weaken and hurt anybody who comes near. Luckily, the forest rangers are trained to find and take care of these zones, helping the forest's ecosystem, which is their job. Forest rangers can also be found in Pardis Derai, but their main outpost is in Gandharvaville in the Invidia Forest, which is also where Tighnari and Kolai live. Now let's go over Tighnari's past. I couldn't find exactly where, but based on the fact he has schooling in the academia and his parents were both academic researchers, his mom studying paleontology and his dad studied insects, I believe he grew up in Sumeru City, but correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, Tighnari was said to always be a curious child with a desire for knowledge. Where most children his age read fairy tales, Tighnari more enjoyed flipping through books in his parents' study, where he absorbed the knowledge like a sponge, and he only wished to learn more. Sounds like a very impressive child. Due to this, he was enrolled in the academia, where he spent much of his time diving himself into his learning and research. Because of his immense academic achievements, he gained the attention of his classmates who asked for help, and also because of his appearance, often asked for photos. Tighnari never really minded or understood this, but his popularity did bring his friend Sino in a weird way. But I'm going to go over that when we talk about Tighnari's relationships. Tighnari was in the Amurta Darshan, and if you don't know what a darshan is, the academia is split into 6 majors called darshans that are basically study of concentrations. They each have a special color and symbol they wear on their uniforms. The Amurta Darshan is a study of concentration in biology, ecology, and medicine, and is the oldest darshan in the academia. I won't go any deeper on the darshans because I eventually will make a video breaking down the academia. But I will say Tighnari is such a revered scholar in his darshan. In the Academia Extravaganza limited time event, he was the representative of the Amurta Darshan. I would also like to point out that graduating from the academia is an exceptional academic achievement because of the insane obstacles in the way from graduating. Some students have literally claimed of being afraid that their parents won't be alive by the time that they graduate. That's crazy. Next, let's go over Tighnari's appearance. In Tighnari's character details, it is said he has large ears, a long tail, and a slight delicate face. And if a less discerning eye were to appraise him, he might even look like a kind of small, rare native animal to the forest. That's cute. as you might be able to tell by looking at his insanely large ears, compared to the ears of other characters within the game, he resembles a fennec fox. His big ears make him sensitive to weather like thunder because it's loud, and wind because it blows his ears inside out. Tighnari's sensitivity to sound actually makes him a better forest watcher and gives him a preference for the mostly quiet forest compared to the loud environment of Sumeru City. But anyway, Tighnari is obviously part fox, but actually his ancestors, the Tighnarians, his parents got real creative with naming him, had jackal heads and human bodies. Tighnarians originally lived in the city of Tignar in the Great Red Sand during the era of King Deshret. They were heavily praised by King Deshret for their wisdom, where he made many of them his priests, including notably Humanubis, who was known to be a great Tignar warrior and is credited to be the greatest sage of all time. He was personally chosen to be King Deshret's familiar, and with this, the Tighnarian became Deshret's followers. However, after the fall of King Deshret, the Tighnarians followed Humanubis to the city of Tayatula, where they resided for 1,000 years and built the Temple of Silence. Here, they would preserve the knowledge that they could recover after King Deshret's fall, and the city would be dubbed the City of Wisdom. However, all good things must come to an end, and for Humanubis and the Tighnarians, that came when they could no longer avoid the roaring wars between the Eremite tribes. One of these tribes took over the city of Tayatula and demanded the Temple of Silence from the Tighnarians, and in order to protect his followers, Humanubis sacrificed himself, gave up the temple, and shattered himself, imbuing his electro powers into his followers. We can actually still see bits and pieces of his powers in Cyno and Sethos, but not Tighnari, who is his kin, ironically. But that's for another video. Through this new power, they were able to drive the Eremite army away, but the people who didn't follow Humanubis that lived in the city was wary of his power and shunned the people of this temple, including the Tighnarians. Because of this, the Tighnarians left and made their way to the rainforest to avoid the war and maintain hopes to preserve their knowledge. This caused them to make an agreement with the academia, but their adaptation and survival in the rainforest is accredited to the Greater Lord Rukkhadevata's grace, accepting them and turning their fur green, which is a symbol of their welcoming. However, things just keep going wrong for the poor Tighnarians because after the fall of the Greater Lord and during the Cataclysm, the Academia sages dubbed the Tighnarians untrustworthy, peacefully ending their contract, and the Tighnarians moved to various parts of Sumeru, both in the rainforest or deserts. Some of the Tighnarian descendants that stayed in the forest slowly adapted a much darker shade of green fur, causing some of them to have a low heat tolerance. And with more breeding with humans, they gained more human-like heads and faces, like Tighnari. So, while Tighnari isn't actually a Tighnarian, he is the descendant of Tighnarians. But to add another fun fact about Tighnarians, when they first moved into the forest, the R&R gave them the name Velukashuna, which in their language means large desert dog. Tighnari discovered this when he was going through one of his parents' books trying to figure out why he had ears and a tail and none of his friends did, and was very distressed by knowing that he's called a desert dog, believing he must go back to the desert where he belonged. He asked his father to take him to the desert, but when Tighnari got there, he didn't even make it 10 meters before he fainted due to the heat because of his darker fur. When he came to, he was so upset, stating that the large desert dog has devolved with my generation. Oh, poor little Tighnari. The next thing that I wanted to go over in this video is his character design, which I kind of already did with the whole kin thing, but I wanted to go more specifically on his outfit and that weird ball thing that he holds. But anyway, his outfit. One detail of Tighnari's outfit that I find interesting is the magnifying glass he wears on his back. And yes, it actually is a magnifying glass. I found that this magnifying glass was a gift from his mother that she gave him when he was a child. He used this magnifying glass throughout his childhood as a way of learning, but when he entered the academia, he knew that his study would become more complex and he would use more advanced academic interests. Though he didn't want to abandon it, thinking that it was his companion in his search for knowledge, he decided he would always wear it. I personally think that this is a wonderful representation of Tighnari's respect for knowledge because it shows his high regard for the journey of knowledge and to understand how far one has come. Another part of his character design that I found interesting was this ball thing that he takes out during one of his idle animations, and after some digging, I found that this is called Vijnana Stormheart, Vijnana meaning life force. And it is also used in his elemental skill called Vijnana Phala, which works by him throwing this ball, blowing it up, creating a Vijnana Khanda, which is some kind of illusion that taunts opponents and draws their fire. He doesn't go and pick it back up after he throws it though, he just carries multiple of them, which can be seen in his story quest when he drops them as traps so that the robot doesn't run away. The final part I found interesting about Tighnari's person is the flower that he wears on his chest, which I think the story behind it can be found in his third character story. However, it doesn't directly say that this vibrant flower came from it, but I like to think that it does. So I'm going to go ahead and say the story. This flower became a very popular decoration to the people in Sumeru's city. However, when they get removed from the rainforest, they quickly die and get discarded, and it's also super dangerous for the flower salesman to go into the forest, which ultimately turns into a problem for the forest rangers like Tighnari. Instead of letting this to go on, Tighnari created a kind of complicated proposal, but I'll explain it as I read, or at least try to. Instead of banning the collection of these flowers altogether, the forest rangers would rather gather and give the flowers to the sellers. The sellers would sell them, but ask the people who buy them to bring them back on the second day before they wither. On the second day, the forest rangers would take them back and dry the flowers the way Tighnari taught them to, give them back to the sellers to give to the buyers as a pretty flower decoration. Some of the Mora would of course go to the forest rangers, but Tighnari thought that this was a better way to do things rather than to ban people from getting the flowers, because this plan would still allow them to keep enjoying the flower, but without putting them in any danger. And I think that ultimately this all ties back to the flower decoration that he wears on his chest. Next thing that I wanted to go over in this video is Tighnari's vision. It is pretty well known that ever since Tighnari was a child, he had always wanted a dendrovision, but just wanting one isn't enough to receive one. People who receive a dendrovision are people who have a desire to gain knowledge and to protect that knowledge, which I think Tighnari checks all these boxes. However, he didn't just gain his vision from an intense study session. Instead, he gained it from calling out a speaker at an academic conference for saying false information in his presentation. I find this particularly courageous because at this time he was still only an uncredible student, but he was still confident enough in his abilities to stand up for the justice of knowledge, not wanting his classmates or teachers to have a chance to think this false information might be true. That's all to the story of Tighnari's dendrovision, but I think this shows perfectly of someone that deserves their dendrovision. Finally, let's go over Tighnari's relationships with other characters in the game. I made this chart to help me get through this easier, but I made it of only people who are aware that Tighnari exists. So first, I wanted to go over my favorite relationship between Tighnari and another character in a game, and that is Kolai. I personally like to think of Tighnari and Kolai as a father and daughter relationship, and a funny story, I actually tricked my brother into thinking that he was Tighnari's daughter, and when he was talking to some of our mutual friends about it, they were like, Tighnari doesn't have a daughter, what are you talking about? Which is kind of funny. But anyway, Kolai and Tighnari first met when Cyno brought her to him, believing Tighnari would be the best caretaker and teacher for her. Though Tighnari was unsure of teaching her, since she didn't even have a preschool level education, but he eventually decided he will take on the task, saying, "It's okay if you can't read or write, we all start having no knowledge. In this, you are no different from anyone else." So Tighnari has ultimately become her mentor and caretaker, helping her through her disease, though many other characters have expressed that they think he doesn't have to be so strict and could show more loving affection towards her. I would like to go over Cyno, who Tighnari considers him to be best friends. Look at these best friends. Anyway, I wanted to go over the story of specifically how they became friends, which started with Cyno being suspicious of Tighnari because of how popular he was in the academia during Tighnari's academia days. Cyno thought that these factions that Tighnari formed were made for harbinging academic corruption. I guess this suspicion he had during his academia days of other people probably helped him get his job as General Mahamatra. But anyway, after observing and talking to Tighnari, Cyno deduced that Tighnari is pure of heart with a love for innovation and knowledge with no questionable dealings. Now they are besties. So ultimately, Cyno trusts Tighnari, and this can be seen when he talks about his admiration for Tighnari's view on knowledge, the story that I just said, and the fact that he gave Tighnari Kolai to take care of. Tighnari also seems to enjoy Cyno's presence, although he's frustrated with his stupid jokes and how hard he can be to contact as the General Mahamatra. Another person that is surprisingly close to Tighnari is Emily. And while they have never formally met, they're pen pals, which I think is fun. Remember the story that I told about him teaching the forest rangers how to dry flowers? Well, I think he actually got that information on how to dry flowers from Emily, because he initially reached out to her asking about her flower-related expertise, and she told him, and after that, Emily asked him about perfume ingredients from Sumeru, and he gave her exactly the helpful answers that she needed. Now they write to each other regularly, telling each other personal stuff about their lives. Next are Kaveh and Alhaitham, and I'm going to put them both together because, both of them believe Tighnari to be one of the nicest people they know. Alhaitham specifically sang a story where Tighnari was extremely patient when Kaveh built a house on a withering zone that ended up being a complete disaster, and Kaveh says that he is always helpful when picking out decorative plants. And fun fact, Tighnari actually introduced Kaveh to Cyno. To go deeper, Tighnari seems to like Kaveh a lot, but based on what he said about Alhaitham, I don't think he trusts Alhaitham, saying he doesn't know if Kaveh staying with Alhaitham is a blessing or a curse on Kaveh. But I just think that Tighnari is being protective of Kaveh. Next, let's do Farzan, and this is going to be quick because they seem to have more of a professional relationship with each other. But Farzan seems to disagree about the way that Tighnari takes care of Kolai, which I don't really know what to say about that. So next, I'm going to go over Nahida, Sethos, Nilo, Lisa, Baiju, and Daya, all in the same thing because they don't really have that much of a relationship with him because they have either never formally met Tighnari or they have had limited interactions. However, they all express an admiration for his knowledge in botany and his skill as a forest watcher and teacher. Now, I'm just going to go over some random unorganized facts that I just thought was fun about him. So here we go. His favorite food is mushrooms, but he doesn't like strong-smelling foods. He has an interest in dreams. He enjoys the Grand Bazaar, but doesn't stay long because of the noise. He likes picking up flowers and leaves and uses them as decorations, and he often gets bothered by dogs trying to play with his tail. He also illegally hosts classes to teach forest rangers more about forest, which is where his dissemination of information voice line comes from, which is funny. Now, for my personal evaluation. I find Tighnari to be one of my absolute favorite characters across all media, and I specifically admire his academic achievement and knowledge, and how even though he will never relent his pursuit of knowledge, he will also never cross moral lines, and has no problem chewing out people that will cross moral lines. Although a lot of people say that this cynicalness that Tighnari has is his downfall, I actually think it makes him an overall better character. He doesn't just automatically like everyone around him, and he is suspicious of people in their relationships, and this can be seen with his view of Alhaitham, or when he first met Traveler, he wasn't automatically all buddy-buddy with him. And I think that this is all because he wants to just make sure that everybody stays safe. So overall, Tighnari is a great character, a great person, and I love him. If you made it this far, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And if you want to continue to support me, you should definitely hit that subscribe button and check out my Twitch and TikTok as well, where I also post a lot of game content. And if you want any more character evaluations or have any questions that you would like me to answer for you about video games, please feel free to comment. Thank you.